the executive director of Evolve 502, which she will tell you what that program is. But she's previously served as Assistant Vice President of Governance and Board Support for Baptist Health. And prior to that, she was Vice President of Institutional Advancement for Simmons College. And she has an MBA from Bellarmine University and a bachelor's degree in communications from the University of Louisville. She has previously served on the executive committees for the boards of the YMCA of Greater Louisville and Metro United Way, and she currently serves on the boards of Maryhurst and Metro Bank. And Mary Gwen Wheeler is an education policy strategist and leader of organizations and initiatives that strengthen communities through educational opportunities. She currently serves as the executive director of 55,000 Degrees. And prior to that, she had various leadership roles in Louisville Metro government as Secretary of the Cabinet for Health and Family Services, which she helped develop the city's first Center for Health Equity, and also helped develop numerous programs focused on enhancing education and youth services like the Mayor's Education Roundtable, Youth Print Leadership Team, Everyone Reads, and Graduate Greater Louisville. She's the immediate past chair of the Kentucky Board of Education, and she holds a BA in American Studies and a master's in Public and Private Management from Yale. So let's welcome both of our speakers this morning.
Good morning. Can you all hear me without the microphone? We good? Oh, okay. So most of you I'm recognizing faces, but for those of you who don't, this is my church home, but it's sort of gone back to, Christmas and Easter is when you might see me most, but so it's good to be here. And because of that, I wanted to just sort of say, I'm here really to give the context and background to this organization that Marlon is leading and where we are with that, because it really stems from sort of a citywide look at education and how can we improve education outcomes in the city. And and my knowledge of Highland Pres and what you all have been involved in that education journey too is something I wanted to touch a little bit on. So for those of you who know me, I've been in and around education most of my life, but since I joined Mayor Abramson's first Metro Mayor role, when we merged city-county government back in 2003, it's the first time I really started looking at education with the city as the unit of scale, the unit of change. And how do we as a whole community wrap around our students, ensure that we're developing a workforce of the future, and that we're getting the most out of our public dollars as we look at education. First thing that the mayor and I was pleased to be involved in was Everyone Reads. This was a major community-wide effort to work with the schools and the goal, we set a goal together that in 4 years we'd have all kids reading on grade level. That was a broad-scale effort where in the schools there was identification of students, there was tiering of interventions, there were reading specialists that were put together, there was a common curriculum for the first time in a long time, and there was common assessment. And during the year, not only once a year, when it's hard to adjust and actually diagnose what needs to be done with each kid. And the biggest part in terms of what you all are familiar with was to get volunteers in as reading buddies to those kids that were identified as struggling readers. Highland Pres, we have a long relationship with Atkinson. Is it still going? Yes. Yes. Okay. So that's the part of Everyone Reads that still is sort of alive. Is that there may be some still getting readers in. But 4 years later, we had a new superintendent. Things sort of changed. And so as a big scale initiative, it moved on to something else. Around 2000, and I mentioned, let me go back just a little bit. When I joined, because I want to give the context of what was happening in our economy too, because this is another big piece. When I joined city government, Mayor Abramson's inaugural speech talked about economic development, how as we as a community position ourselves. And he said, it's no longer about location, location, location. It's about education, education, education. And that was really reflecting the shift that we were all experiencing in this nation. structural shift from an industrial economy where location to distribution was important to a knowledge-based innovation, information age economy. And that required many more people getting that higher level of education. And everyone reads, 2008 comes, we have a big recession. We start losing jobs, and most of the jobs that we were losing were those manufacturing jobs or other jobs that were sort of middle skill and middle class, good earning wage. And something like 90% of the jobs that came back after the height of the recession in 2010, we were at about a 10% unemployment rate. About 90% of those jobs came back required some post-secondary education. Now, I was serving also as the mayor's education advisor, and I was part of a national network, Mayor's Education Policy Advisors Network. Many mayors across the country were taking over their school systems, saying that we've got to have a different level of intention around what our schools mean for our communities. Jerry didn't have much of an appetite for that. But he did understand that he had a bully pulpit, he had convening power. How do we as a community come together and form what you heard referenced as the Mayor's Education Roundtable? At the same time, the business leaders at Greater Louisville Link were also looking at this really from that workforce stance. And together, came together and set a goal that in 10 years, sort of put it in that competitive city framework that the Greater Louisville Project had been thinking about, said we need to be at least as good as our peer cities and in that top tier. And what that would entail was getting to 50% of our population with a college degree. Associate's degree or higher, or post-secondary credential of some sort. And that birthed 55,000 degrees, because that's how many more degrees we needed to add in that 10-year period to get to that goal. Setting a goal with the leaders of education, business, government, civic leaders allowed us to really do a couple of things. One, have a place to talk about what we were going to do. Also, look at the data together and really dig into where are some of the barriers. And also energized all the partners to set their own goals and try to align around that whole pipeline. Mayor Fisher, it was 2010, Mayor Fisher's in. He embraces this because he campaigned on lifelong learning and says that setting that community goal is not quite enough when each one of us need to do the same. We have to say, what is our skin in the game too? So there were pledges from the universities, from the school system, from the archdiocese schools, from Urban League, Metro United Way, the city, businesses starting to say, how are they going to contribute to getting their employees more educated? So we had a broad scale effort, and I've come and talked with you all about that before as well. About halfway through 2015, we were very pleased with some of the progress, but our data, looking at the data, also was telling us we weren't going to be on track to reaching that goal. And here we are in 2019. We've added 29,000 degrees. We're at 43% college educated, whereas we started around 38%. But we're far from that the goal for next year of what we had. So this was evident earlier, and we started to say we've got to dig deeper. One of the things that Mayor Fisher said is we've got to look beyond just making, when you look for it at a 2020 goal, you're really looking at who can be college educated by then. So we're really focused on high school and above. He said this starts much earlier and with families. So starting a sort of real focus on pre-K and early childhood education, all the way through the K-12 system. And then what are those workforce connections? Because having a career goal or having a credential that's actually going to lead to one of those higher wage jobs is also important. And so formed a sort of cradle to career framework that also allowed us to look at a broader scale. But we decided to really dig deep, and we spent the last almost 3 years looking across the country at who's doing this, what else can be done. Certainly there's issues around, each institution, the school system's gone through its own gyrations, U of L's gone through its gyrations, but as a community, are there things that we can do together and cross over those silos so that we're looking at the whole child? And there were two big barriers that really sort of were ones that we decided we needed to dig into. The first was that the equity gaps across the pipeline. Low-income students, first-generation students, students of color were the ones that weren't getting to that goal that we had. And at every level, it was something, this is not any one institution's fault. This is sort of structural issues that our whole community needed to look at. The other was that since that 2008 period too, the cost of college has been going up. And some of that's because of state disinvesting in higher ed, and that burden getting shifted to students and families. But we were seeing here that meant that basically since we started in 2010, the college going rate from Jefferson County Public Schools has been continually going down. Only about 50% of kids who graduate each year from JCPS now are going on to college. So, we know there's a big gap, and so and we think that a lot of that is driven by the cost. So it's now time, we basically said it's time to do something different, and we came together to create a new organization, basically, and to formalize this work that we've been doing sort of at a convening level, at a loose coordination, all have the same goal, and actually get serious about being coordinated across these sectors. And that's what I want to let Marlon talk about. In October, we had, of last year, we set up 2 new boards, hired Marlon Cole as the first executive director of Evolve 502, as it's now known. For a while, some of you may have heard something about Louisville Promise. That was also an interim name. But to attack that cost barrier and to really focus on getting more kids and students through the pipeline. So I'm going to let Marlon tell you a little bit about where we are and what our vision is. But that's some background.
Thank you, Mary Gwynn, and thank you all for letting us come and visit with you today. It's a pleasure to talk about this work. We were fortunate to have the great leadership of Mary Gwynn and many others in this community that have really stuck with this issue and effort and said we need to continue to do more to address some of the issues that our children and families are facing. And so I'm very grateful to be a part of this effort now moving forward. And I think it's great too to see the other speakers that you have had leading up to this, because I think a lot of these things, issues and concerns that you've been talking about are really part of our work too, that we are struggling with trying to find ways to address some of this to help students overcome some of the concerns that they're having. So I think this is a nice backdrop to our work moving forward. So sort of our overarching kind of big bold goal, as Mary Gwynn was speaking about, is to ensure that every child in Louisville is prepared for college, career, and a successful, productive life. And when we say every, we're very intentional about that word. As Mary Gwynn was talking about some of the racial equity gaps that we see in education, that not everyone is enjoying the same level of prosperity in our community. We are really wanting to address every child where they are to provide what they need to be successful. And as Mary Gwynn mentioned, we know that building an economy and providing an opportunity for everyone to succeed and be successful, that some level, we believe everyone needs some level of education after high school, whether that be a credential of some sort, whether it be a 2-year degree, a 4-year degree. We know for folks to really reach their potential, to really be able to provide a family living wage to support their families, it's necessary to have some level of education after high school. So our strategy, as Mary Gwynn spoke about, is to really, ultimately our bold goal is to increase post-secondary completion. And so how are we going to do that? We are providing free college, and we're starting with community college to include all of the Kentucky community colleges in our state, as well as Simmons College, which is our HBCU in this community. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but really saying free college really lifts that mindset and kind of changes the culture around education and sends the message that education can be for everyone, and that everyone should move forward and consider these opportunities and that they are for everyone. But to ensure that our students are really able and ready to take full advantage of this scholarship opportunity, and I'll talk a little bit more about the scholarship opportunity in a minute, we know we need to build what we're calling comprehensive supports or wraparound supports to help alleviate those barriers that keep kids from being successful in school, whether it's living in poverty, as Mary mentioned, drug abuse in the home, hunger, learning disabilities that have not been found just because the family doesn't understand how to navigate the system to have services for their children. All those kinds of things impact children's ability to be successful and to learn. And so we want to build supports around kids to help them with this piece. And again, we're doing all of this around a cross-sector collaboration and using strategic data to help us move forward. So we're trying to work in a different way to engage the full community in this work because it's a community issue. We know the schools can't do all of this by themselves. That's our strategy. So talk a little bit about what do we mean when we say free college. So we are pledging to provide for all JCPS graduates, as I mentioned, an opportunity to attend any community, Kentucky Community College, as well as Simmons College of Kentucky. And our goal is to also build what we're calling a 2+2 partnership that can provide a better pathway for students that want to achieve a 4-year degree through the community college effort. We're talking to University of Louisville now, and we'd like to have other partners in our community that help us make this happen. We are providing what is called the Last Dollar Scholarship towards tuition and fees. We know many of our students will be eligible for Pell and other federal aid, and so our support would come in after this. We are also providing what we're calling an opportunity grant for additional funds that will really impact our lowest income students and help us achieve this equity that we were talking about in our disbursements. Many of you have had students go off to college, and you know there are more costs related to that effort than just tuition and fees. There's books, housing, travel and transportation that keep kids from being successful and really continuing in their process. And so this opportunity grant will help support that. We're talking now about providing a $2,000 grant for students at the income level of $40,000 or below. With this opportunity grant, $1,000 to be used. And when we really talk about what we're trying to achieve here, it's really a success program, not just an access program. We not only want folks to have access to higher education, but we want them to be able to matriculate successfully through that process. And so this is very much about how do we build our support around this effort to ensure that folks can be successful. So it's more than just providing money to attend. So how are we going to do all this? We are looking right now at data. This is, I'm sure this is not real easy to see from your vantage point here, but this is what we call sort of the pathway to post-secondary success and really outlines where students should be along the continuum. Starting with postnatal care and development at children below 12 months. All the way through here you can see reading at grade level by the end of grade 3. You can see the 5th dot point there. Then you go through Algebra 2 by the end of grade 11. And then at the end there, what we also want to ensure is job attainment at the end of the day, because that's what this is all about. We want folks to be successful. We want them to be able to find those jobs that will help them provide for their families. And so this is sort of the continuum that we look at. And this is, we are looking at pathway data now with JCPS to identify where are students along this pathway and what are some of the challenges that we're finding and where are kids falling off. So this is where we're kind of benchmarking students and will help us in the development of those wraparound supports that we talked about. In addition to looking at pathway data, we are also going to be looking at fiscal data, starting in particular with JCPS and Metro government to say, okay, here are the issues, but where are we spending our resources currently? Is there a way to reallocate resources to help better meet needs, work together more collaboratively? Are there other resources in the community that are addressing similar issues? Maybe a program's doing very well, but it just needs to be scaled. Or maybe there's a program that's not working so well, and we might need to find another opportunity to use those resources. So all of that plays into then how do we better serve our students and families and provide those services in a more collaborative fashion. This is an example of what wraparound supports might look like. And as Mary Wynn talked about, as we were leading up to this work, we were working with an organization called Say Yes to Education, which is a national model that we are following here in our community. And this is an example of some of what some of those services might look like. And you see the school is in the center. The hope is that you can provide many of these services and programs within the school, because we know students are there, they're going to be able to better access services. So for instance, mental health services, I know many of you have heard Dr. Polio is very interested in having mental health coordinators in every school. The benefit of that obviously is that they can receive those services right at school. Families are comfortable coming to school, and so there's a better chance that those students will be served if we can bring those kinds of services either to school or in the communities where they're living to help them. Give you just some examples of Say Yes community in Buffalo. You also see here there's free legal services, which I found interesting. 6 school-based legal clinics were opened and really helped reduce the eviction rates of families. Keeps families whole, and it gives them more structure, obviously, when they have a home, and so that was a service that was very, very successful in Buffalo. So these are just some examples. We might do some of these, but again, just to give you a sense of that. Summer learning, I think, was on here too, or extended day in your program. We have already started an effort this summer working with JCPS and an organization called Blocks, which is the organization around out-of-school time in our community. We have about 3,000 students that are in a program now that through the summer will be able to test, kind of look at the results post-test and after-test to see were we successful in keeping students on track. We'll hear about the summer drain that happens during vacation times. And so our hope would be that we'll be able to expand that effort, learn what worked, what didn't, but be able to expand it and have more students take advantage of that moving forward. So that's just some example of what a wraparound service might look like. Now this is a very busy slide, but I just wanted to kind of illustrate, as we talk about using data, you have to have some data platforms that help you access the data, analyze the data, those kinds of things. And so what we are working on now is to find, and JCPS has a number of systems now that helps track students, but it's not the same across the board with every school system, with every individual school, and not looking at it all in the same way. And so we are working together to build what we're calling an education data platform. Thank you, it's a little easier to see. An education data platform that will help us sort of gather this information on students. The ultimate goal is to track students before they fall off. So that ladder that we showed a little bit earlier. We want to capture beforehand so that we can have interventions to keep folks on track. And so this data platform would have a predictive component. We'd be able to store data. We'd be able to have flags alert us when something is happening. If there's a murder, for instance, on a street the night before, and we know we have students that live on that street, teachers would know, okay, this happened and Johnny may have been impacted. So I might want to check in and see what's going on, see how he's doing. Hopefully it was no one that he knew or family member, that kind of thing. And so the school-based personnel engaged in all of this work. But the beauty of this too is that we'll be connecting to what we're calling United Community, and I don't know if you all have heard about this effort, but again, it's a data platform, a community data platform that Metro United Way is providing the backbone support for. And it's allowing us to connect not only education, but health and human services. It's really a referral platform that allows us to refer to organizations that have agreed to be a part of the United Community. JCPS will now be able to connect to that as well. And so the resource counselors in the schools will be able to refer students to services. The beauty of this referral is that they will know if the student was able to be helped and supported. So there is a communication back after an agency refers, and this is within the whole system. And for JCPS purposes, if a counselor refers a kid to a service, they'll know, were they able to be helped? What was the outcome? What were some of the interventions that might have been put in place? And track really to see, okay, how has the student been a couple of weeks after, a month after? Was this really helpful? So it's a wonderful effort, and I think too what's beautiful about this is it's going to help us better understand the agencies and nonprofits in our community. How are they able to address the issues? Is there capacity to address what's going on in our community? And are there gaps? Are there services that aren't available that we might need? And so I think the United Community Platform is going to be a great addition to all of this work, helping us to really, as I said, track our data, track what's going on with the folks that we're serving in a better, more unified, collaborative manner. And I'm sure you'll hear more about United Community as time goes on. Mary Gwen spoke of this a bit already, but now you can sort of see this in a graph form. We have 2 boards as part of our effort, and both boards really make up a full set of folks in the community that are business leaders, nonprofit and government leaders, folks that are in the education space, higher ed partners, all of those groups. So we're very fortunate to have them a part of this effort. So we have the Scholars Foundation Board, which is really responsible for developing the model of the scholarship, the parameters of the scholarship. And then under the Scholars Foundation Board, we have the fundraising cabinet that Mary Gwen is co-chairing with Diane Medley. And that group is really focused on raising the funds to make the scholarship happen and to help support the operations of the organization. So we are in our early stages of the
Linda Valentine is on that
Yes.
cabinet, and that's how we got.
Yes, thank you. So we've got a great group that's engaged with us there in helping raise those funds. And then on the other side, we have the Evolve 502 board, which is really more the operations piece of the equation, if you will. Under the Evolve board, we have the mayor, the superintendent, head of, again, of many of our nonprofit organizations, higher ed partners that are serving on this board. We have an operating committee, as you can see, sort of down in the middle. And when we're talking about these wraparound supports and all of this work, that is the body that's really providing the oversight for that work. And so they've been digging into the data that I talked about. We're awaiting the fiscal data that should be here soon. But really digging into that and kind of identifying, okay, what are the areas that we're going to focus on? There could be 10 or 20 areas that we need to focus on, but we realize we can't do everything at once. And so we'll probably identify a few. The summer learning that I mentioned earlier, since that's sort of started and underway, we'll continue with that work. But we might identify 1 or 2 other areas that we really want to dig into and focus. And we're going to create task forces to focus on those areas. And so the operating committee will provide oversight to those task forces, help populate them. So we'll be able to bring even more people in from the community that might be subject matter experts under whatever the areas are that we're going to focus on. It'll be very helpful there. So the task forces will be working to really dig down into the issues and decide what are the root causes of some of these concerns. Some of the concerns might seem academic, but we might determine that there are social and emotional issues that are impacting the results there. So this group will really be digging into that, making recommendations back up to the operating committee, and then we will implement hopefully some programs and services within our schools that will help our students. So that's sort of the look and flow of that work. Here's a list of some of the names of the folks. I'm sure you'll recognize some on our Scholars Foundation Board. Mary Nixon is our chair. Again, we've talked about Mary Gwen being our co-chair of our fundraising cabinet, and there's some other community members that are helping us in this space. Some of these folks also served on, we had a separate committee, this we call the scholarship committee, that really delved into the parameters of the scholarship. Mayor Thompson with the Council on Post-Secondary Education was a part of that group. We had other higher ed folks in the room that really understand this work of the scholarship and help vet that for us. So we're very fortunate to have this group engaged with us. Maybe Foundation partner, CENS, James Graham Brown. And then this slide shows some of the members of our boards of directors, the organizations that they represent, and I love this slide because I think it just, and there are others here that are probably not imaged, but it really shows depth and the collaboration around the table. But this was really the group, as Mary Lynn was talking about earlier, that said, we need to do something different in our community to move us forward, and we need to do this collectively as a collaborative. Excuse me. And this group also said, we're on board. They signed memorandums of understanding to talk through how we will work together, how we will agree to share resources and information to make this happen. And many provided some of the initial support to kick off the Evolve 502 effort. So we have to continue to add to this slide as we move forward. So we've shared a lot of information with you this morning. When we think about what we really want you to maybe remember and kind of help us share in the community, is that this effort is not a short-term solution. We all know that we didn't get here overnight. Some of the challenges and issues that we're facing have been around for some time. It's going to take some time to address them. And so we're really looking at this, taking a long-term approach and looking to make long-lasting change. When you're talking about making generational change, that takes time. So our effort is really focused on that. With our scholarship and the modeling of where we think students will land, we are expecting that we'll provide about 11,000 scholarships to students over the next 15 years. Our plan is to start with the class of 2021 with this scholarship. We're going to be very focused. Yes, I'm sorry, the JCPS graduating class of 2021 with our scholarship. We want to do as much as we can for the class of 2020 as it relates to connecting them to services and scholarships that are already in place, and we'll be talking a lot more about that this fall with students and helping in that regard. We also know that more than half of our scholarship and grant dollars will go to families that are making less than $40,000 in our community. And with our wraparound supports and services, we'll be connecting more than 100,000 students and families with resources to help them achieve their best. And what we're really excited about as well is this is really giving companies an opportunity, a real incentive to invest in our region. It is critically important that if we are going to grow as a community and be successful, that we have a skilled workforce that can take advantage of jobs and move companies here for more opportunity, and just really lifts up all tides in our community if we can do this and really speak to the powerful tool of having an educated workforce and what that means for the success and life of the community. And we always like to end with our mission statement that really just talks about the access, the support, the reaching of all in our community, and helping overcome institutional barriers that have existed for some time in this community, and doing all that we can together to lift up everyone. So any questions? I know it's a lot of information. Yes, Mary Glenn will help you answer these.
100,000 students, is that over how long? I mean, over 50?
Well, with the wraparound supports, we know that there are about 100,000 in the JCPS, so now of students. So we're talking about trying to wrap around supports for all of the students within JCPS now. It would be our hope that we can implement some of these programs and services. Like I said, we're starting to dig into those now. We're getting into the fall. I would hope by the next year, starting in the January, February timeframe, that we will, if not sooner, with some things, depending on what we decide to do, we can probably start much sooner. But the goal would be to have at least some programs in place. And over time, I think other things will come up and bubble up that we'll want to address and focus on. But we were really talking about in the time, we know the number of students that are within JCPS now. So we're hoping to impact as many of those as possible.
So how many children are within the public school system in Jefferson County?
We've got about 110,000
Mm-hmm.
currently. I know that number is close, but yes, that are currently within the school system. And when we talk about the scholarship piece, which you bring up a good point, we are going to, when we launch that in 2021, we are talking about, we're saying 13 classes of students, which means the kindergartners at that moment through those seniors. We would love to continue that moving forward, and we'll see how successful we are with our fundraising efforts. But we thought that would be a nice group to start with, because I think you can really image and see kindergartners through seniors and understand what we're talking about and who that impacts. But again, we would hope to be able to do more after that. But we're going to start with 13 classes, which takes about 15 years for those students to get through, starting in 2021.
Where does the funding come from?
Good question. Currently, many of our foundation supporters have really provided the backbone support for the organization. So the CENS Foundation, James Graham Brown Foundation, the Gaines Foundation, and others. But we know we'll need to branch out a lot more to really make the raise, and I don't think I just spoke to the amount of money. 50 million, oh goodness, I said 50,000. That would be great, wouldn't it, Mary? What could be done? 50 million to provide the scholarship support. So we know that we're going to have to reach out to individuals, corporations, other foundations. We'd like to be able to reach out to folks even outside of our community if that's possible. But it is our hope that the community will really galvanize around this effort and support.
And many of those partners that you saw the logos for have contributed, sort of a membership fee too, including $100,000 a year from Metro government. So some of your tax dollars are helping support this as well. The investment that this school system is making in the education data is also.
Is any public funding involved?
We would love for there to be some public funding involved in it. So yes, and that'll be part of our advocacy efforts. We would love for the state to provide a scholarship opportunity for our students. That would be beautiful, and take the lead and get engaged as many other communities have with Promise scholarships. We know we'll need to advocate for that. There has been some advocacy done earlier on to kind of just start with those conversations. But yes, and we think even with the wraparound supports, there might be opportunities to pull down some public dollars to help support programming if we think there's a need for that moving forward. But we think we'll really need to sort of demonstrate success with this effort to get folks on board more and more, but that's definitely a big piece of this. We can see more about the public.
I would only mention that, as we've looked at other cities, I mentioned that earlier, that there are some cities that have put together interagency operating agreements to do this kind of backbone work, and that's sort of a vision that might evolve that way. That's one of the reasons this thing came up, is because we kept talking about, new iterations of how to work together. And so, for instance, in Oakland, California, Oakland or Berkeley? Oakland, that they've got an interagency operating agreement that's publicly funded, that is connecting city and schools and some of the service, the health and human services type county services into a group that is then doing this kind of coordination. So fundamentally, the coordination is to try to better utilize our public dollars, and then in the actual scholarship, part of the reason that we also looked at having a time-bound period for raising, some places have raised a permanent endowment. We looked at saying, let's do this for a full class of students, kindergarten beyond, because we don't know what's going to happen in terms of, as Marlon said, depending on who's president, we may have funding for this at the federal level. So that, yeah, don't laugh so hard.
Yes, in the community colleges, often it is almost impossible for students to get enrolled in the developmental courses that they have to take before they can go on to take regular classes. Are you working with the community colleges to ensure that the students who are going to be taking advantage of this will have the opportunity to get into those classes, because those classes will have to be expanded, the numbers?
We do know JCPS has started some efforts to provide some of these courses within the schools now, and high schools, with the juniors and seniors, to help try to eliminate some of that. So that they're getting those courses and actually taking more dual credit courses, so that when they are ready to come to school, they've gotten sort of that out of the way, they're more prepared and ready to move forward. So there are efforts. And JCTC in particular, we think most of our students will go there. There might be some that go to some of the other community colleges, but we feel like the majority will go there. But they've been really spending a lot of effort and time to address, as they say, becoming more, we always talk about kids being college ready, but colleges being ready for students and what that really means, and that everybody has to play a role in that. So they've been putting systems in place, and we had some work with that, and Mary Lynn's work with the Linda grant that we have, and providing some of that structure and process to ensure that we're able to move students through better and address their needs in a better way. So we're making many improvements to be ready for these students as they're coming forward.
And if they do go and say to a community college, and they need these developmental courses before they can continue, it's going to take them longer than 2 years to get through. So how long would this scholarship last?
You're exactly right in terms of identifying one of the key barriers of, it's not just about getting ready for college, it's about finishing, and far too many students don't finish. Some of that is the financial barrier, some of it is what you're putting your finger on, which is the readiness barrier. Jefferson is like colleges across the country that have taken a deep look at developmental ed and remedial ed, and there's a new wave of, they know that if the student takes one course, their chances of finishing are diminished. If they take 2 courses, they're virtually unlikely to finish a degree. So what community colleges have done is to look at that remedial education, started to do what they're calling co-requisite, a formal term, but basically you're taking a lab to do the remedial work, at the same time you're taking the credit-bearing course. And Jefferson has started doing this in math and English, and it's been phenomenally successful. The first couple of classes that took this lab and credit at the same time did better than the kids who benchmarked into the credit-bearing course. So that's one of the things they're doing. We built into our scholarship program that at max we will pay for 2 of those courses, because just the chances of movement, and so that's both to encourage students to get ready before, and we're also then putting pressure on both the institutions, Jefferson to do more of this co-requisite, and JCPS to get more kids ready. And they're working together, as Marlon said, on trying to do so.
Thank you.
I have a question, and that is, Kevin Cosby is a wonderful human. But Simmons College was Simmons Bible College until about 5 minutes ago. And it's still, officially a Baptist organization. When we're paying for students to go there, not that there's anything wrong with that, how does that not violate the separation of church and state, since we're not doing it for other religious colleges?
Well, I'll try to speak to some of that.
It's privately funded, is the answer.
Yeah.
So
The scholarship is
privately
privately funded, so it's not, that's the simple answer.
Right. And you're right. Simmons started, though, as a liberal arts school in its founding, and I know that's the goal of Dr. Cosby is to bring it back to that effort. And they have added in, they have an education focus now. As you've probably heard recently, they're going to be partnering with JCPS to have more teachers of color engaged, and so I know there is an effort to really align that school in a different manner as we move forward. And we also understand the importance of HBCUs in communities. Excuse me. And understand the need to have a highly functioning HBCU in our community. And so we support and try to do what we can to help in that effort as much as possible. We have a student success coordinator now that's working and doing some work in that effort. But you're right, it's hopefully funded money, so that answers your question. But excuse me. Allergies, I'm sorry.
I tend to deal with a lot of students who fall through various cracks And one of my concerns is, will your total support system come forward to college with students? It seems to me that there are a lot of students out there who are working in fast food, living in their cars, eating from Dare to Care if they eat, and going to college. There are other students who have gotten scholarships, maybe were good high school students, they get to college and they just feel like they've been dropped on the moon, and they desperately need that surround care that you're talking about. Is there any part of your plan that deals with that?
To extend the wraparound supports to college students as well.
Yeah.
Yes. We will have, we have student success coordinators on board that are helping with a big piece of that. Again, JCTC has done a great deal in trying to provide that kind of backbone support. That's part of the opportunity grant as well, to help students with other issues that they might have. But you're right, we have students that are heads of households in their families.
That's right.
Taking care of mom and dad and helping with mortgages and those kinds of things. And so how do we keep them encouraged and lifted up?
Fed.
Right,
House.
right.
Yeah.
JCTC has created what they call a hub, where they're going to have they have a food pantry in place, and they're bringing in social services into that spot right on campus, on their downtown campus currently. I think they'd like to expand it, but for many of those things to address needs that our students continue to have. So,
And does their child care system, is it available to students? It's something students can afford?
child care.
At JCCC, I know that the community college has a child care center, or at least it used to. Is it affordable for?
Then I don't know that.
You know, I'm not sure that still exists.
Really? That's too bad.
Yeah, I don't know that it does, but
Yeah.
part of this hub is specifically to make sure that students that are eligible are aware of, you create a place where people are coming by to get food or, and it's an opportunity to talk to them about other things that they might be eligible for. And so SNAP, childcare, transportation dollars. In fact, Jefferson, part of this has been that, talking about it at the community level, Jefferson has known that some of their students who they most wanted to serve from West End were not able to get to school, and transportation was used probably tested, giving them TARP passes. That was so impactful on student attendance that now we've been able to pressure the people that make these decisions and worked out a deal where all Jefferson students now have free TARP pass, of cards.
You need to work with TARC on its roots too.
Yeah, I know, that would be nice, yeah.
Ron, can you explain what a Promise Scholarship is? I mean, my shorthand for this program is free college for all JCPS grads. And also that other places have already done this. So can you explain what free means and put it in the context of Nashville or other places that are already doing Promise Scholarship?
You're right. There are many that are having success with Promise scholarships in many different communities and iterations. What and others are doing some similar things that we're doing as well. But we like to say the beauty of what we're doing and the differentiator is that we are building the wraparound piece as well with the access and the scholarship opportunities. So again, trying to help eliminate barriers, address issues, to ensure that students can be more successful with the Promise Scholarship. As kind of having those co-mingle together, we think is a good model and sees good results in the community. But there are many Promise scholarships throughout. We know Tennessee has one just close to us that are more state funded, and we would love to see that be the opportunity here. That would allow us to maybe do some other things with our scholarship funds if that happens in the future. And I don't know if I'm answering your question, David, but it's really.
I would take it back to the bones. Is it $10,000 or $500? How do you qualify for one? What is a Promise Scholarship? What's last dollar mean?
Last dollar means many of our students we know, and especially those students that will be attending community colleges will have federal funds that will follow them. And so we are saying that we will come in and pick up those funds, pick up after those funds have been utilized. There are some students that are still considered somewhat low income that may not qualify for Pell and federal aid, so we would be providing more scholarship monies towards those students. With that said, I'm still answering your question, but the last dollar comes in after other federal aid. And really for us in this community, and to say, we'll see how successful we can be. When we were talking with Say Yes to Education, for instance, in their communities, they have smaller school districts than ours that they're dealing with. As Mary Gwen was talking about, the higher ed, cost of higher ed is not the level that we have in our community. And to really provide the full 4-year opportunity was going to cost us somewhere around $1 billion to do in this community.
Create a permanent endowment.
A permanent, right. And so we said, okay, that may not be realistic for us at
Would
this
you
time.
say the number again?
Over $1 billion.
$1 billion,
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
I heard $1 million, I thought, no.
That our community said, okay, we don't want to just drop this, we still think this is a wonderful opportunity to do something in our community, so what can we do? And so there was a decision made, well, let's start with community college, let's make it the last dollar scholarship, so that we can take advantage of the federal aid that students and the Pell Grants and those kinds of things. But then the opportunity grant comes in to provide those additional resources to our students that need them the most. So that helps with the.
I don't know enough about federal grants, so I may not fit, but are those interest-bearing loans? Is that a part of that? And are these students going to graduate in debt, or are they going to be debt-free when they graduate?
They would be debt-free from our perspective. I mean, we're talking federal grants and Pell dollars that they don't have to pay back.
Okay.
And then we would come in with our piece. And so, yes, we are not obviously trying to saddle our students with more debt
Right.
in that situation. That is a critical piece that happens when we know that the kids get into situations and they don't fully understand the ramifications of that, come out with a job that they can't even pay back some of the debt that they might be in. And so that's definitely something we're trying to steer the kids away from.
And I would just add that one of the opportunities, as we've talked about, is how do we've talked about what supports are there for kids. By offering the scholarship, one, it gives us an opportunity to really talk with students as they're making their college decision. And we really want to help. Part of the issue is around the guidance to students about how much debt. And so some students may still be taking out debt to cover those other costs. But, if they're taking out, $100,000 worth of student debt for, working in, at a rad tech, type job or a social worker in a job, that's not a match. So that's part of the idea is take away the tuition barrier and, if they're taking out some student loans to cover some of those other costs, to give them the advisement of, you don't have to take out the thing you're fully eligible for. Take out just what you need. That is one of the driving reasons why we knew we needed to look at cost as and affordability as part of the solution in our community.
And with the opportunity grant, we had heard stories of students that maybe had a lab fee that they had to pay that was maybe $75, and they had to take that to move forward and didn't have those resources. And so the opportunity grant helps take care of those kinds of things, again, to ensure persistence with our students, that they don't have those kind of barriers as well.
Textbooks and computers?
Yeah.
You mentioned the importance of this, the Promise Scholars, that you need to start at the early years, the primary grades. And I'm aware of some research some years ago where they compared the success of different scholar programs in different communities. And the programs that had intensive education with the parents, with young children, to say education is possible for you, that it really changed the way of thinking within the family, within the child at a very early age. And those programs had a much higher success rate with students having success with the Promise Scholars. And I'm just wondering, what are you doing to educate parents to say, this is a possibility, you need to be talking to your children, yes, you can go to college. And when the child
absorbs that, it changes how they approach education in their life.
Very much so, very much so. We've had a lot of conversation around the table around that, that we do need to, and parent engagement means different things to different people. But if you at least have the support in the home for a child, even if the parents aren't educated themselves, which is many times the situation, but at least that they're talking positively about education and why it's important, speaks volumes. But we will be digging into that quite a bit. And how do we reach parents in a way that is not intimidating for those that aren't educated themselves? Many times that's the situation. Like, I don't know how to guide my child because I didn't have this type of support and guidance. I don't know. I didn't go to college myself. I don't know what to do. Really trying to help families help and be advocates for their kids. And so we've talked a lot about that from the operating committee standpoint, and plan to kind of really engage in an outreach around all of that and talking to teachers and trying to understand what are you hearing from parents, why aren't they coming to parent-teacher conferences, those kinds of things. But I think even just at the smallest level of having a positive message in the home about, yes, we're going to encourage you, I may not be able to help you myself, but we're going to encourage you to to pursue education as a way out, as an opportunity to grow. But you're right, it's critically important to include the parent piece and support in the home as much as possible.
I have to cut us off. Sorry. Well, y'all stick around for a couple minutes if there's more questions. I just want to put a shout out to next week that Chris Sanders is going to come talk about Empower West and Simmons College, kind of piggybacking on what we just heard. But that class is actually going to take place in the session room across the street. So if you walk in this door in Plume Mobley and go up the stairs and to the left, that's where that will take place because we will have the Sages Luncheon set up in here. So come next week, but come across the street. Ask anyone if you need help finding it. Thank you guys so much.